and how do I negotiate the tremendous wealth I've been given, and how do I think of the tremendous wealth I've been given? So first of all, I'll say that I started off as an entrepreneur. By the time I was 29 years old, I had achieved a net worth of zero. Hopefully that translates well to Portuguese. And now I'm 55, so a little over 25 years later, I become one of the wealthiest people in the world. So I've been poor and I've been rich, and I've kind of had to observe that. Baha'u'llah is very clear in how he talks about wealth. I'm going to read one of the hidden words that I really like. O children of dust, tell the rich of the midnight sighing of the poor, lest heedlessness lead them into the path of destruction and deprive them of the tree of wealth. To give and to be generous are attributes of mine. Well is it with him that adorneth himself with my virtues. So here Baha'u'llah is telling us, if you're rich, to listen to the poor, and not only that, don't be heedless. So he's actually scolding the rich, and he's saying to the rich, don't be heedless of your need to give and to be generous. In fact, the way I look at wealth is really everything is God's. And we walk in this material reality, but the true reality, we know from the Baha'i writings, is spiritual. And in this spiritual reality, the true wealth is spiritual. That's why Baha'u'llah is warning the rich that they'll be deprived of the tree of wealth. If wealth were material, Baha'u'llah wouldn't say that. He also warns in another hidden word, and I'm going to pull that up. He warns in another hidden word that, I'm going to read this one as well. This is probably my favorite one. It's tell the rich of the midnight sighings of the poor. So let's see if I can pull that one up. O children of dust, tell the rich of the midnight sighing of the poor. Nope, actually it's a different one. Sorry, that's the first one. This one is the rich but for a few. Let me read this hidden word. O ye that pride yourself on mortal riches, know ye in truth that wealth is a mighty barrier between the seeker and his desire, the lover and his beloved. The rich but for a few shall in no wise attain the court of his presence, nor enter the city of content and resignation. Well is it then with him who, being rich, is not hindered by his riches from the eternal kingdom, nor deprived by them of imperishable dominion. By the most great name, the splendor of such a wealthy man shall illuminate the dwellers of heaven, even as the sun enlightens the people of the earth. So again, Baha'u'llah is warning the rich. He's saying that wealth is a barrier. Now, why would wealth be considered a barrier? In this world we live in today, and I can't speak for Portugal as much, but I can tell you I think it's true worldwide. I know in the United States, we glorify wealth. We glorify the wealthy. Sometimes we vilify the wealthy as well. I believe that wealth should be neither vilified nor glorified. Wealth is simply a tool, and that tool should be used for helping the world. So for me, probably the greatest burden I feel every day is how can I use my wealth to make the world a better place? How can I best use my wealth? And Bill Gates, and I know he's in the news a lot right now for his divorce, but he's been an amazing, he and Melinda, his wife, or now to be his ex-wife, have been amazing philanthropists. And he said it's harder to give money away than it is to make it. And I would agree. A lot of philanthropy that I see is what I call Band-Aid philanthropy. And that means you see someone who's cut and you put a Band-Aid on, and then they're cut again and you give them a new Band-Aid, and rinse and repeat. So essentially, we're always putting a Band-Aid on the problem, but we're never fixing the problem. My goal, especially as a Baha'i, is to find the solutions, the true solutions. And the true solutions to all of our problems on earth are spiritual. What does that mean in terms of philanthropy and how wealth can be applied? It means that instead of feeding the hungry, we look for reasons why they were hungry in the first place. Instead of giving housing to the homeless, why were they homeless? What caused that? In the end, as we dig further down, we find that all of the problems are spiritual. So what causes homelessness? Well, a lot of it is drug abuse. What causes, and alcohol abuse. What causes that is lack of connection. What's the solution? Well, we know that Alcoholics Anonymous and 12-step programs have been very successful worldwide. What do they have? They have a higher power. So it's separation from our community and separation from God that leads us to fill our souls with something else, fill our to feed ourselves spiritually. One of the things I'm fond of saying is that every day we have to eat. We have to eat food, we have to drink, otherwise we die. And nobody would consider, outside of a 19-day fast, nobody would consider not eating. And we always eat, but sometimes we forget to feed our souls, and our souls need to be fed as well. Why is wealth a barrier? Because wealth prevents us from seeing the spiritual reality. We can paper over any problems. We can buy a solution to this, or so we think, or buy a solution to that. We can't really buy anything meaningful. Now, if we look at the life of Baha'u'llah himself, Baha'u'llah was the son of one of the wealthiest noblemen in Persia. He wanted for nothing. And yet, by his early 20s, he was already called the father of the poor because he was so generous to the poor. Abdul Baha was similarly known for his generosity to the poor. Neither one of them had interest in wealth. I try to emulate them in my day-to-day life. Even though I'm very wealthy, what I try to do is not worry about that wealth. And my attitude towards the wealth is, if God wants to bless me with more wealth, that's great. That's more money to give away. And I want to give that money away in ways that solve problems. So getting into a little bit more detail, what do I mean by going to the root causes? Well, Baha'u'llah told us what the root causes of humanity's ills are. One of them is racism. In America, we're told that racism is the worst ill. That's the most important and pressing problem in America. And I would venture to say worldwide. Sexism is another huge problem. Nationalism, religious prejudice. Look at what's going on in Israel, Palestine right now, or at least a week ago. All of these things are problems around the world. And so it's the failure to realize that we're one human family that is the root cause, I believe, of all of humanity's major problems. If we look at COVID, for example, well, how does that relate to COVID? COVID's a virus well, first of all, there were many people who rejected science. And so there were many people, at least in the United States, who were more interested in their own health than their neighbor. If we apply religious teachings, particularly the teachings of the Baha'i faith, about the harmony between religion and science, this alleviates that problem. If you look at how the World Center handled it, I can't speak exactly, but I know the World Center had few, if any, problems from COVID because they followed the science. And if you look at the rest of Israel, most of Israel that surrounds them had very few problems, but there was a lot of problems around the ultra-Orthodox areas where they weren't particularly interested in science. Similar problems are in America, where there's some very evangelical Christians who are also not particularly connected to science. And in those areas, COVID was much worse. There are a lot of people I've talked to in America, and I've heard talk in America, who say, why should I wear a mask? Why should I do this? Why? I don't need it. We should be looking at our collective good in everything we do. If we all listen to Baha'u'llah and search for truth without prejudice, if we all listen to Baha'u'llah and we had a world-embracing view, not a view of how can I help myself, but how can I help my neighbor? It's the same thing that Jesus taught, that Moses taught, that Muhammad taught. This is what will make humanity thrive. And what does that have to do with wealth? Wealth can pay for that. Wealth is happy. Wealth is a tool that can be used to promote the oneness of humanity. So I give to organizations that fight racism. I give to organizations that fight sexism. I give to organizations that fight nationalism, particularly in the United States. Immigrants aren't treated as full human beings. I give to organizations that fight religious prejudice. So we have a center, for example, in Akko, Israel. Some of you might have heard of Akko, and that center serves Jews and Arabs. And it's very interesting. A little less than a year and a half ago, we went to a place called AIPAC, which is it's the lobbying organization for Israel in America, the biggest lobbying organization. And most people who are members of AIPAC and supporters of AIPAC are very pro-Jewish and pro-Israel. But they're not as concerned about the Palestinians. And so when we were presenting our project, which treated Palestinians and Jews equally, and talked about the need to treat Palestinians with equality and respect and dignity, a lot of people weren't listening to us less than a year and a half ago. How much difference a year can make. Now, Naeem, who's a Palestinian Christian who runs that center, has more people coming at him he knows what to do with. Our center is getting a lot of attention from the Israeli government because they realized we were right, that it does matter how they treat the Palestinians. And we were doing something that helped the whole community. In fact, the community is coming together much faster because of the work that our center did. And in the wake of the disturbance, in the wake of the little war they had, the ties that were made over the last few years within our center are helping bind those communities together. And that's the kind of work we should be doing, I believe, as Baha'is all over the world. Working to get our neighbors to talk together, to eat together, to understand their oneness. In every country in the world, there's forms of division. Varies by country. Sometimes it's a religious break. Sometimes it's a break on race. Sometimes it's class problems. In certain countries, for example, the caste system in India. Each country has its own separate problem, but we can, as Baha'is, address those problems, and we should address those problems within our individual community. And I really believe that the solution is to spread our faith. Ultimately, if you ask where I'm going to give the most of my wealth to, the majority of my wealth will be to Baha'i causes. So my wife, who's a Catholic, and of course in Portugal you might know some Catholics, one or two. We've been married for 25 years. In fact, we're celebrating our 25th wedding anniversary this weekend. I'm taking a break to give this talk. But we have a joint foundation and we give to many causes, a lot of the same causes, but some are different. I formed separately another foundation underneath our movie company, which is Baha'i owned, and we're giving a few $1 million this year to Baha'i organizations. So like a laser, we're giving money to anti-racism groups and anti-sexism groups. We're really focusing on that. That's our main focus for everything we do. And it's interesting because we're not solely giving money to Baha'i-inspired organizations. We're actually calling up organizations and telling them we're Baha'i-inspired and saying, you know what, you fit the kind of work we're doing. We'd like to give you money. And by the way, here's what we are. And in order to do this, there has to be a spiritual component. And we have our groups now. It's interesting, within our company and within our groups, they're starting to remember Baha'i holidays. They're starting to understand the Baha'i principles. The people we picked out were already doing the Baha'i types of things, fighting racism, fighting sexism. So it wasn't a big leap for them to understand that there's a faith that believes in the things they're already doing. One of the things that I think is very important and where wealth can actually make a big difference is taking that wealth and having an outer facing view of that wealth to reach into many different communities. So not just within the Baha'i community, but within, as I do, within the Catholic community, within the Jewish community, within all different communities, and try to help wherever we can unite the world. We don't unite the world by staying in our own community. We unite the world by reaching out to many different communities and binding them together. I believe that is the work of Baha'is all around the world. And that is a great place for wealth to be applied. I think that it's not important for anyone to be rich like me. In fact, when Baha'u'llah says that wealth is a burden, I understand that very well. Sometimes when someone calls me, I don't know whether they want my money or they want to talk to me. That's the sad thing. I do get Baha'is reaching out to me sometimes from all over the world. Can you help me with this personal thing? And I always have to say no, because I don't give to Baha'is personally. Even causes because we're grasped so much, we get more. Unfortunately, there's more need in the world than even someone like me has money for. So it's a challenge to have wealth, and it's a challenge to not get lost in the wealth, to not have my ego get in the way, because wealth can feed your ego. People are kowtowing to you. People are telling you how great you are. People are putting you first in line when that's not how anyone should be treated. And so it's a challenge for someone as wealthy as me to stay grounded, to understand the meaningless of my wealth, the meaninglessness, to understand that I'm no better than anyone else. To understand what Baha'u'llah says when he says, "Want not thyself over the poor, for I lead him on his way. Behold thee in thy evil plight, and confound thee forevermore." I say that one every day just to remind myself that I am just another human being on this planet like everyone else. I think that I'm very grateful as a wealthy person. I became a billionaire, right? I became a Baha'i 6 years ago. I was raised Jewish. I'm very grateful for these teachings, in many ways, but particularly as someone of wealth, because of the burden that wealth can put on someone. I'm very grateful that I know my wealth is not important. I'm very grateful for the teachings of Baha'u'llah. I'm very grateful for the guidance I'm getting, even from the World Center. We're working with the World Center on some of the things we're giving to. I'm so grateful to be a Baha'i. I look at the world today and I look at the many problems the world has, and I'm so grateful that I can wake up every day and know that I have a purpose. I'm so grateful. I was talking to two people yesterday who are actually, one of them does some great work in immigration work. We actually sponsored his organization. He's a lawyer, a wonderful man. And I was talking to him and a friend, and they said, I can't believe how positive you are. And to me as a Baha'i, it's easy to be positive. One problem you have in philanthropy is that you get to see all the problems of the world. And I said, yes, you get to see the problems, but as a Baha'i, I know it's going to turn out okay in the end. And the other thing, if you're focused spiritually on people, even if people are sad, even if people are poor, even if people are sick, we still look at their spirits. And so I think it's really important to every day, wake up every day and thank God for the air we breathe and the food we eat and the roof over our heads, and to look at every person that we meet as a human soul, first of all, and then as a body second, not to look at the material differences. When we focus on the material differences, that is where the whole world has so many problems. I don't know the problems in Portugal as well as I know the problems in the United States. I've actually never been to Portugal. The closest I was Spain when I was filming my movie The Gate a few years ago. But I assume that you have many of those same problems of separation. I assume you have many of the same problems we have in America of separation from God. And how glorious it is that we're blessed in this day and age to have the words of Baha'u'llah and the guidance of Baha'u'llah. And so with wealth, it's very important every day to apply the teachings of Baha'u'llah, just like everything else. And I think that's one of the things that I'm really trying to do with my life, much more so in the last couple of years, is to make everything in my life coherent and harmonious, and to take every step I do and make it part of the faith. In fact, when I first became a Baha'i, I taught the faith mostly by telling everyone about Baha'u'llah. And now I'm trying more and more to do what Abdul Baha did, which is to walk in a way that people ask me, who was Baha'u'llah? Why are you different? And that happened to me last night. And so more and more people are saying, well, what makes you different? And I think this joy that we exude when we immerse ourselves in the ocean of his words, when we really use the faith to become Baha'is, is evident. And as the world becomes darker, and the House of Justice has told us over the next 20 years, it's going to be pretty dark for humanity, some of the darkest times we've ever seen. We must cling to the light, and we must cling to the center of the faith. We must cling, as Shoghi Effendi told us, to the eye of the hurricane that surrounds us. And so with wealth, we can't worry about our material wealth, only that we have enough for ourselves. But really, most importantly, we have to take this material wealth and do everything we can to help this sad world right now, this divided world, and try to make it into the paradise that Baha'u'llah came to create. So with that, I'd like to open it up to questions And any questions about anything I've said? Let me make sure I can see the chat. Should we put the questions in chat? Looks like we have a few things in chat.
Let me see.
Maybe if I can just make, first of all, thank you so much for your generosity of time during your wedding celebration. Amazing you dedicating time to us. It's just like, and time is the most precious things ever. And I was thinking how wealth can be used, and definitely education and media, I think, are just very, very powerful ways together to shift mindset, to make a difference. But my question really goes with the latest guidance from the House of Justice is local activity and global impact. And I wonder if you could share some of your views. Local for you would be Chicago, I guess, and global is what the world needs. A global shift in education and so forth. Right now, things are changing faster than ever. We saw with the Me Too, with the Black Lives Matter. It's a great moment for big shifts to happen. I would be very curious to hear from you, Steve, about what is your views on this local influence versus or together with global influence.
Well, we start locally. Thank you. It's a wonderful question. The way I got a letter from the House of Justice a few years ago when I first became a Baha'i, and I wrote to the House of Justice and told them I had great wealth and I wanted to give it away. And they said, you have to balance everything between the global needs, the local needs, and my own ideas as a philanthropist. And so it can't be me overpowering the local. What I've started doing is I've started looking for and searching under kind of every rock for successful ventures that are done locally. And what I provide is funding. So that way they have a local focus. Rather than me saying, I want to do this for the community, I wait. Or I'll give you an example. Parent University in Savannah is a wonderful thing by Michael O'Neill, who I've become very friendly with. But he did this for 20 years. And what he's doing is he's educating parents in mostly African-American community. And he's educating parents and really helping unite the community. He's become very popular with the local churches, even though he's a Baha'i. I find projects like that just need money. They already are running well, and he needs a little money and maybe a little advice occasionally as he's scaling. And that way, my money is providing fuel for the fire that's already there. We have another project, Regional Learning Cooperative, that is revolutionizing education in Los Angeles. Again, Baha'i run, using the Baha'i principles. Focused mainly on a school that has a lot of African Americans and Latin Americans, Hispanic Americans. And so I'm trying to find existing projects like that. I do believe you have to look locally, but when you look locally, it's not me as a philanthropist coming in and saying, this is what your community needs. It's me as a philanthropist listening and watching and really supporting. Another project I support in America is the amazing Barbara Talley, who is a Baha'i here in America, who did something called Pupil of the Eye. And she single-handedly did more to uplift the Black Baha'i community in America than any 10 people could do. Barbara's in her 60s. I'm in my 50s. I'm 55. And I think I have a lot of energy for 55. Barbara can literally run circles around me in her sleep. She's an amazing woman. And she's done this amazing project. And I'm so honored to support it. But what I told Barbara, and I've stuck to my word on this, is, Barbara, I'm not going to tell you how to do this. You already know how to do this. I'm just going to give you money and you run with it. And I'll be your friend and admirer. And that's what I am. She doesn't need me telling her what to do.
Thank you, Steve. I think Gordon has 2 questions. Gordon, you can just unmute yourself and just go ahead and ask.
Steve. Okay. I've been here chatting away. Well, first of all, about your wealth, I'm assuming that came about as a result of other goals, your work goals, not the objective wasn't just to make wealth. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. Okay. Secondly, I heard you say several times about fighting isms, sexism, racism, etc. And I assume you probably read Michael Carlberg's book on adversarial systems. If we're protesting within an adversarial system, we're we're doomed. It's whatever victory we make is just temporary. And
I have not read his book, but now I will. I'm going to put it in my list of to reads.
Oh yeah, and he's got YouTube talks too. So yeah, that was my question. Have you considered when you fund an organization, are they working as protest in an adversarial system, and of course their victories or progresses will be only temporary. The whole thing is, of course, education. Our whole goal is to advance the consciousness of advance the awareness of the unity of humanity. And
so yes, I think about that all the time, and we're very careful, and we judge the organizations. And I have Laura Herrick, who runs my Baha'i Giving. She examines every group, and yes, we're very careful to avoid adversarial type groups. So, for example, right now, if you look at the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, there are those who say the Israelis are right and the Palestinians are wrong, and there are those who say the Palestinians are right and the Israelis are wrong. And I always say that any solution that doesn't take into account both Palestinians and Israelis can't possibly work. In America, you have Black Lives Matter, but Black Lives Matter sometimes can be very adversarial in their viewpoint. There are people with Black Lives Matter is a very broad umbrella. So we actually don't support Black Lives Matter directly, but we support a lot of anti-racism issues. One of my issues with Black Lives Matter is there are people within Black Lives Matter who are extremely anti-Semitic, up to the very high leadership. And I can't support an organization that says, well, protect this one portion of humanity, but hate the other. Nor would I support a Jewish organization that hates blacks. I wouldn't. When you start having this separation, and that's unfortunately the way our society is to a certain extent. That's what we're taught on social media. So I definitely look for Baha'i inspired groups. Another problem we had with our family foundation, my wife and I were lockstep on this. We had a group in Chicago that our people wanted to give to, and they wanted to give to a black organization, which was fine with us. But their main project was creating a marijuana dispensary. Neither one of my wife or I had any desire to do that. And there's a beautiful book called Smokescreen, which was written by Kevin Sibet, a Baha'i, and it talks about how the marijuana industry is in America and probably around the world basically pulling the wool over our eyes, and really hiding all the great harm it does to society. And we know that Baha'u'llah says that marijuana disintegrates the brain and destroys the soul. So we would never support that. So there are projects that absolutely do not fit within the Baha'i lens. And the Baha'i lens, as you so beautifully put, is all about unity and universal love. It's not, I hate this person more than this person. And so it can't lead with I love black people, but I hate white people. It can't lead with I love white people and I hate black people. It has to lead with we are one human family. And in terms of racism, I want to be very clear. It can't also be that I don't see color. It has to be that I see color and I see us as a beautiful garden, and that some of those flowers in that garden have been deprived of the sunlight that they need because they have been deprived of basic human rights like healthcare and education. So it's giving equity and dignity to every human being without hating any other human being. It's not accusing anybody. It's not saying white people are bad. It's actually saying that black people and brown people, at least in America, have been deprived of full equity to lead a full life. Thank you very much for the book suggestion, by the way. I will definitely read it.
Yeah, there's a TED Talk. As an introduction, you can see his TED Talk. It's easier to start with.
It's on my agenda for this weekend.
Thanks, Gordon. Jack, do you want to go ahead and ask yourself your question you put in the chat?
Hold on. Yep, here I am. Okay. Yeah, just very briefly, I don't know. I wanted to ask about the law of Akukala. If you could say a few words about your understanding of the law and how, as the Universal House of Justice says, it is going to lead to the spiritual transformation of the whole planet?
Well, I'm not an expert on a kukula.
Right.
I have to say that I'm about to give for the third time for kukula. I have given, relative to my great wealth, very little to kukula, and the reason is my wife is Catholic. So I asked when I first became a Baha'i how to handle it, and they said, well, work it out with your wife, and whatever she wants to do, you give. So
Right.
I calculated at the time 19% of our wealth. I figured we had so much wealth, that, we really didn't have anything. It was like a rounding error what we actually needed. So, and I had just become a Baha'i. And so if you can imagine this figure that I gave my wife, which was a huge figure, she said, how much do you want to give for kukula? And I gave her the figure. She thought I'd literally gone crazy. So I said, well, how much would you like to give? And she gave a figure 1/100 of the actual figure. And that's what we gave. And for years, that's all I gave for kukula.
Mhm.
My wife and I have just divided a little bit of our wealth. So we have a joint portion, and then we have individual portions that we can do whatever we want with. And which is really nice, because now if I want to do something, I can do it on just that. It's not the great majority of our wealth, but so that I just paid a kukula in full, and I just got another. Probably next week I'll be getting some more money, and I'll pay kukula.
Yeah.
To me, I'll pay 19% of, because everything is access to me. I don't need, I have my living expenses paid, my taxes are paid.
Mhm.
So I believe that is such a wonderful gift, and that's how it's described. It's the right of God. That's what kukula means, and it's such a gift to be able to give, knowing that that money is going to the world center and to Baha'u'llah to be used for the betterment of the world. To me, I'm overjoyed after all these years to be able to give to kukula, and I really believe that what will happen in the long run is it will be a wealth transfer. So what will happen is it will be a wealth transfer from the people like me who have too much money to people who need it. And imagine if you took 19% of the wealth from all the billionaires of the world
Mhm.
and gave it to the poor. I mean, you'd have billions of dollars you could give to the poor, and it would change the world so drastically.
Mhm.
And imagine if it was given in a way, instead of a lot of, unfortunately, programs that are charitable, that are philanthropic, that are really like water and sand. One thing that was mentioned is that these adversarial programs will lead nowhere. But imagine if it was given in a way where we educated people, where we uplifted people, where the house was guiding us. I think that will ultimately transform the whole world.
Mhm. Mhm. Thank you very much. It sounds like you've worked out a solution for your own family, which is what you're supposed to do.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. We have one more question in the chat, which is kind of a discussion, Steve. I'm just going to read Sahba's comment. He says, how do you view the responsibility of the individual in light of this quote? And the quote is, wealth is most commendable provided the entire population is wealthy. If, however, a few have inordinate riches while the rest are impoverished, and no fruit or benefit accrues from that wealth, then it is only a liability to its possessors. Abdul Baha. My superficial reading suggests that one must do one's best to avoid reaching high levels of wealth.
I think that what we should do, I've changed. I wasn't born a Baha'i and I wasn't raised a Baha'i. I didn't spend most of my life as a Baha'i. I believe as a Baha'i that we should spend our life contributing to humankind. Some of us will get wealthy from that. Like, for example, we have our movie company, and my movie partner, Justin, might get wealthy from his incredible talent as a director and an actor, and now as an owner of a movie company. That wealth can be used and then transferred to help other people. I think that Abdul Baha, obviously Abdul Baha is always right, but what he's really saying is, how can I be happy in my great wealth when someone, my brother and my sister, because we're one human family, it's the recognition of us being one human family which will help us understand wealth better. Right now, people who are wealthy, for the most part, don't understand the oneness of humanity. I'm one of the few Baha'i billionaires in the world. So I'm actually going to meet one of the other few Baha'i billionaires in a couple weeks, and I'm very excited by that. But I think that most people I meet who are wealthy, I see this, that they don't fully comprehend that the person in the street is literally their brother and sister, that everyone is their brother and sister. And so to me, the hardest challenge is not so much to give away my wealth. I'm committed to giving away the great majority of my wealth, but to take that wealth and make sure it's applied to have the greatest good in the world. That's my only concern. So that's my answer to that question, is that I think that those of us who are blessed with material wealth, it's not a bad thing. It's a blessing if it can be used to help. And it's a burden, as I said in my earlier quote, I'll agree, it's a burden if we try to use it to only help ourselves, because it takes us further from God. And that's basically a road to hell, to perdition.
And Sahba just asked a second question: is that would you mind sharing the letter of the House of Justice when he wrote to the World Center? When you wrote to the World Center?
I don't have the letter handy, but I can send it to you maybe in the next day or two. I can find it and send it to you.
That would be amazing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd be happy to share that letter.
Saba is about to become a billionaire, and he wants some advice to make sure he goes on the right track, and it's great.
The best of luck, Saba.
Eileen has a question. Hello, Steve. Thank you for your time and your talk. I wonder if you know the Thrive community managed by Foster and Kimberly Gamble. Oh, sorry. And you do, can you tell us what you think of this organization? Thank you.
I don't know the organization, so I have no opinion.
Okay. For those of us who are not super wealthy, but would like to give to organizations that support the oneness of humanity, do you have a list of organizations that you have already vetted? The choices are staggering. Can you share your wisdom to give us a head start?
You know, I would look for local organizations. I would talk to your LSA, NSA, and really look locally and say, how can I help? And really research. And you can help with time and money. So you can volunteer, you know, you could, and also volunteering in the community is a great outreach for the faith. So I would look locally for, you know what the Baha'i faith says to do to fight the isms. You know the problems in your local community. Maybe it's a religious prejudice problem. Maybe it's a race prejudice problem. Maybe it's sexism, and work on helping those people and bringing the teachings. That's what I would do. You don't have to be wealthy to do that. To have, you can be wealthy in spirit and share that.
Thanks, Steve. Chris, go ahead. You can ask him your question.
Yes, my question is, I'm not rich, but I'm quite comfortable in life. So when I speak with my friends, and because I like a lot of teaching the faith, and when I speak about them, the importance of the spirituality, and most of the people say that it's easy for you because you have enough and you can focus your life and your time to spirituality and spiritual activities, but we need to make life to bring money at home to pay the bills and so on. So how can what you can share according to
spirituality does not require that you have wealth. I mean, everyone, most of us have. I still work, although my work is a little different. Most of my work isn't giving my money away, but I'm actually quite busy, and I'm actually probably busier than your friends who have no time for spirituality. Sometimes I'll get started at 7 in the morning and not be done till 7 or 8 o'clock at night, and really just have a break for lunch. But I still find time to pray every day. And I say the hidden words. I say the Arabic hidden words I've got memorized now. So I say them every day, and I say my Allahu Paz. And every day I wake up with a prayer. You don't need that much time to be spiritual. I try to read the Word of God every day. We're supposed to read it in the morning and night, and I try to do that. You don't need, and my bad days, I don't have much more time than do the minimum. On my good days, I get to do more. I guess I don't buy that excuse. I think that all of us can make time, even if it's 5 or 10 minutes a day. I would ask your friends who are so busy working Do you have time to eat? And if they have time to eat, then they have time to feed their spirit, even if it's only 5 or 10 minutes a day, and say you don't need much time, but is it important to feed your spirit? And maybe just ask them what they think.
Thank you.
There's a lot of positive reactions to what you just said, Steve. I think we have time for one more question. I think, Pedro, do you want to ask your question?
Okay, yes.
This could be the last one then.
Okay, oh. Okay, so although I wouldn't mind to be wealthy as you are, there is something else that I'm more envy from you, and that is your positivism. You are very positive. I've listened some talks from you before, and I was amazed. As you said, one person said to you recently that you are very positive. Tell me something about that. You were born like that, or you developed that? Because I really want to be more positive, not more wealthy, but more positive for sure.
Go swimming in the ocean of his words every day. The hidden words make me more positive. I had a spiritual transformation when I was just before my 49th birthday. I was 48. It was in 2014. I visited Akko and I went to build our center. I was invited by a non-Baha'i to build our center, who's become basically my brother, Bill Strickland. And he and I have built centers now in a couple different places, and we'll build others. When I walked into the garden surrounding the shrine of Baha'u'llah, I walked in one person, I walked out another. So there's probably a little residue from that spiritual transformation, which makes me a little bit more joyous. Baha'u'llah grabbed my heart. But there are days where the world tries to bring me down. There's lawyers and there's lawsuits and there's people who, I had a woman who basically accosted me. Almost her boyfriend had to hold her back from accosting me at the Baha'i temple a couple weeks ago because I talked to her sister. All I said was, would you like some information about the temple? I was just showing her, giving people information. And so there's people who have negative energy that you'll run into. And what was helpful is I was with a friend of mine who's Baha'i, and she said, well, we need to pray after this. And so prayer always helps. Meditation, I try to wake up every morning and meditate, reading the word of God, all of these things. It's your spiritual grooming. It's like taking a shower every day. It's like, eating good foods, taking care of your body, taking care of your spirit every day makes you more joyful. And always try to look at people's soul first. That's what I always say, look at people's soul first. Everyone you meet. Abdul Baha said to look at everyone, greet them with kindness and love, and great kindness and joy. And if you think, he's our exemplar. Try to, and I always say this, I wake up every day and I try to imitate Abdul Baha, and I go to bed at night knowing I failed, and I get up the next day and try to do it again. And I'll keep doing that the rest of my life.
Just if I could say, I think you're so goal driven and all these activities, just energy is, this is what keeping you positive is the goals you have. It's not, isn't it? Would you agree? Yeah.
I think it's love. I think love keeps you positive. Love everyone around you. Love all of God's creation. The beauty in life is all spiritual. The more you open your spiritual eyes, like your chakras, they might say if you're Hindu, the more you open your spiritual eyes and the more you live in the world of the spirit and not in the material world, and we realize that the material world is just a poor, dim reflection of the spiritual world, the more we see beauty around every corner. As the Baha'i prayer says, God is the most manifest of the manifest and the most hidden of the hidden. And may God be manifest to all of you today and every day.
Thank you so much, Steve. This was truly great. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm going to go ahead and invite you as well, you, Steve, to participate on our next talk with Soveda, which is next weekend. She's going to talk about reframing. I'm just going to share my screen again.
Wonderful.
Present. She's going to talk about, oh, sorry, I hit the wrong button. Reframing our conception of power and fit leadership. Lessons from Abdul Baha. So we can meet again next week at the same time. Feel free to join us and also share the information with others. Thank you so much again, Steve. Thank you, Sahba, for the translation, and Chris for helping me out here. And thanks for everyone for joining us. Steve, there's a lot of positive reactions in the chat. Thank you so much for joining us today. Okay.
Well, I'm going to say my one word in Portuguese. Hopefully I didn't mess it up. I won't mess it up too much. Obrigado. Is that how I say it?
Obrigado.
Obrigado. Obrigado.
De nada. Obrigado. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Steve. Obrigado.
Thank
Beijinhos.
you so much for having me. Have a great day. Aloha, everybody.
Aloha, pa.
Aloha.
Hey, João Jacques.
Hello, Zach. How are you?
Olá, tudo bem?
Tudo bem.
Beijinhos.
Oh, Jack, nice to see you.
Nice. Who is that? Oh, José Luis.